Right, I think we will start. And just on behalf of myself, Ben Hollier from Ring Central, just want to welcome you all to our Tech Talk today. Hopefully you'll be able to see all of our faces on the screen. If not, you may need to just alter the view so that you can see our faces down the right-hand side. That way you'll know who's talking. I'm joined today by our friends from Conosco and my colleague Marvin from Ring Central. I'm going to hand over to Max just for a little bit of an introduction. We'll set the scene a little and then we will kick off and on we go. So Max, over to you.
Good morning all and very warm welcome. I'm Max Villanaric. Some of you will know me. I'm one of the founders of Conosco. We are a full spectrum technology and telecoms provider. We essentially specialize in everything from strategic consultancy through to delivery of that strategy, support of infrastructures, mobile and unified communications, and of course all under the watchful eye of our security division, which specialize in both InfoSec and CyberSec. I'm joined by Amit as well from Conosco, so perhaps you could give a quick intro to yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Amit Titani. I'm Director of Tech for Conosco. I look after all of the client-facing teams across consultancy and technical account management. And for us, we see a lot of trends within the market, which is really what we're here to talk about today.
Thanks, Amit. Over to Ring Central for a couple of introductions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Max. Thanks, Amit. So Ben Hollier, I am a partner manager at Ring Central, which means I have the pleasure of looking after our partners and working with them around a joint strategy and go to market with the Ring Central offering. As Max said, there are many complementary benefits of our joint partnership, and we look forward to telling you more about those as we move on. And I'm going to hand you over to Marvin, who is going to tell you why he's in his car and give you a little bit of an intro.
Thanks, Ben. My name is Marvin Tress. I am lead partner sales engineer in EMEA for Ring Central. I've been here for 12 months now. I am the technical spoke of Ben's wheel. So we work with our partners to enable and all of that kind of good stuff. Why am I sat in my car? We'll come to that a little later. But let's just say I am also a part-time flexible working ninja.
And a teacher and an entertainer. Like what most of us probably are today.
Well, thanks everyone. So we're talking today about remote working and digital transformation. Obviously that's been a very hot topic for a long time, but clearly we find ourselves in extraordinary circumstances. And we have over the last quarter or so seen an enormous acceleration in the adoption of the services that assist with remote working, Microsoft Teams being one, but obviously unified communications and any sort of communication tool has been a huge part of it. I think just as a quick summary, our approach is really that businesses adopt an appropriate strategy that's holistic across the whole organization's requirements and objectives. And what the current circumstances have forced us into is that the time pressures have led to, in some cases, what we call shadow IT, which is the piecemeal adoption of individual products and services, often by different departments who haven't consulted each other, and quite often results in the overlap of solutions and often costs as well, not to mention confusion amongst users who are supposed to be using all this stuff. So today we wanted to talk around remote working and the move for digital transformation in general, and the nuances around that, and how the holistic approach is important. The irony is that I'm actually sitting in the office rather than remote working, but I put that down to my Virgin internet this morning going up and down relentlessly, so I rushed to the office. But Marvin, on the other hand, has taken it to the other end of the spectrum and remote working in his car. So we've got a fairly broad range between us here.
So thanks for that, Max. Just for everybody that has joined us today, we do have a Q&A feature. So if you have any questions, just ask them as we go. You know, we want to be talking with you, not just to you. So please do let us know any thoughts you have. I'd like to start off by actually asking you guys a question. Can you let us know the size of the organization that you work for? How many people are reliant on communications and collaboration within your business? I would love to see the sizes of the businesses that have joined us today. So if you can find your way into the Q&A box and then drop us a couple of digits so we know what your businesses look like, I think that'd be quite fascinating. We'll just give that a couple of, oh, there we go. First one in, oh, second one in. Now, for some reason, I can't open my Q&A panel, which is fantastic. But yeah, some.
I can see them. We've got 4 in so far, Ben.
Yeah, I'm just trying to open them up. We got 5. I might have to call upon Beth to ask if she can see the numbers that sit within that.
Yep, you've got Jake Fraser at 370, 70 employees, 40, 63 in the UK, 400 worldwide, and a 75.
Oh, fantastic! It's a good. Thank you for that. I think it's because I'm sharing, but I'll double check. But yeah, some very interesting numbers, and I think everybody on the call will have a sense of what their change is looking like in their environments at the moment. As Max said, you know, some have gone to the office. You know, most are working from home. Some are testing the boundaries and working from vehicles, probably on their driveway, just for a bit of peace and quiet, as is Marv doing. And some sitting with random quiz show dartboards behind them. But we're going to kick off, and thank you for doing that. Please, for those of you that haven't popped in the size of their business, we'd love to know, because it's a good identifier around sort of understanding some of the challenges perhaps you face today. So we're gonna kick off. We're very much here today to talk about what we have seen through both our businesses, but not necessarily also just from the business perspective, but also how that has impacted the whole working environment inside and outside. You know, we've essentially taken the office home, or if you're like Marvin and myself, home has always been the office. So how has that changed? You know, I won't turn the camera around, but I have a ridiculously large monitor and various wires and cables and stuff that have finally come into full effect and have been used almost every day. So I've enjoyed changing my home environment to kind of fit how I work. But yeah, so I'm just going to hand over to Max and Amit, really, just to talk about what you've started to see, the desire, the appetite for the whole digital transformation piece. What have you started to see develop over this period of time? Because I think everyone will agree this is not just about COVID. There's a bigger picture here. It's almost that we as human beings are finding more productive ways to traffic our day and still have that valuable time at the beginning and end, spend with our families, and yeah, so keen to see what you guys have seen.
Sure. Shall I kick off, Max?
Sure.
Excellent. So really, from a digital transformation side, from our customer base, we've seen pretty much every end of the spectrum. So what I mean by that is we've seen customers and clients that were historically probably fairly resistant to working from home and having a remote workforce, to the other end of the spectrum where they were already doing it. And for us, the ones that had it embedded into their culture and their working practices, have felt less of an impact initially when obviously the country went into lockdown, and have embraced this normal way of working. For the ones that were more resistant, I saw that there was massive spikes from them for our type of services, in regards to assisting them, getting them up and running, showing them, the ways that they can collaborate and the tools that, is open to them. So, that was a initial journey that they went on. I think now, having done this for 3 months, everybody has seen that it's clearly efficient. There are metrics that they can point to and see that they can get work done. There are large organizations as well as small ones that are almost making this the new normal. You see the large industry, big players like the Facebooks, the Googles and the Twitters and the Squares, who are basically saying we're never going back to our office for the rest of this year, and are looking to more of a distributed workforce going forward. All of that really is critically underpinned by making sure that everybody has the right tooling and the right infrastructure in place. It's for me, it comes synonymous to building a house, right? If you're building a house, you want to make sure there's rock solid foundations to build your house upon. And working from home, if we use a similar analogy, we've got to make sure that the right tooling is in place and making sure that clients are taken through that transformation process, so that they are ready to embrace it going forward. When we are out of lockdown.
And I guess question for you, Marvin, do you feel that businesses are reacting to the whole lockdown and the rise of remote working and the requirement to do it just because of the current situation? Or do you think people are already in the throes of evaluating, but have now all of a sudden just accelerated their journey?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. We can't forget the current situation, right? But I think there comes a point in time where we need to put it to one side for a minute and just think about what comes next. I think Max mentioned earlier we had this situation forced upon us, and it made us have to make some decisions. It's interesting being in this industry. A lot, you'll know yourself, Ben. We talk to customers a lot, and we talk to them about migrating to cloud, and sometimes customers delay the migration to cloud because they're not sure and it's a bit risky, and that's the perception. But then overnight, a lot of these customers actually had to make that jump from their on-premise PBX to cloud overnight, where they've been deliberating for a long time. The other side of it as well is, when we're talking to customers, we hear they've always talked about working from home and flexible working. It came in a few years ago that you had to offer that as part of your business and be able to assess it. So flexible working has always been able to be requested. Whether you granted it or not was a different conversation. But now everyone's had to do it. Even some people. I love working from home, but some people don't. Some people have never worked from home. So how do you handle that? There's a whole different side to it there in terms of people as well. Again, that is very much current situation related, and we'll talk a little bit more about what might happen next. But I think what we saw was a lot of organizations' plans to be able to react to something like this maybe weren't as concrete as they'd anticipated. So some big decisions were made. One of the other big areas that I see as well is contact center. So when you think about flexible working, you think about the back office, the UC users. Well, what are contact centers going to do? These are the cash engines for a lot of businesses. Their customer care, it's how you differentiate. That is something that we see a lot now as well, because even contact center agents have had to go and work from home. And cloud just really powers all of this, really, to be able to access it from anywhere without having to install any software. It just makes it really, really easy. I actually just wanted to mention as well, I did a webinar not so long ago with the NHS, and it was really interesting to hear them talk about flexible working. Who has ever had or said one sentence that included the words NHS and flexible working before? No one ever, right? But they were telling us that actually they've had the boundaries or the shackles taken off now, and they can work from home. They can now implement flexible working policies. This situation has allowed them to do what they've wanted to do for a decade, but never been able to. So, yeah.
I think we're going to see a much broader horizon of working environments. It's not that everyone's going to whiz home forever, and it's not that everyone's going to whiz back to the office forever. I think it's just going to broaden all of the requirements. Anecdotally, I've heard of some city companies wanting to double the size of their office space to allow for social distancing.
Wow.
But yeah, only yesterday I was on a call with a potential client who was talking about wanting to halve the size of their office because they've enjoyed working from home so much, and that the flexibility and the work-life balance, I think, is something that is very much on everybody's mind at the moment. And they were talking about how do we encourage people to come to the office for some of the time, but allow them and give them as great technical experience when working from home as they have when they're in the office. And I think that leads to something that's really interesting, which actually I was asked to write a blog about yesterday, which I will do in due course. But it's if businesses are able to save a huge amount of money on office space, then you could use some of that money to invest further in your technology, to then ultimately find yourself in a position where the running costs of your business are lower because of the investment that you've made in technology to allow for more flexible working conditions, but remaining as productive as you always have been. And I think that's a very interesting cost analysis that businesses will start to see over the coming months as well.
Absolutely. So as Ben asked the question around people's sort of footprint on their businesses, for me, it'd be really interesting to understand from the attendees who is actually their business looking at going back as they are, or are they looking at a more flexible model? So that's the first question. What model do you think you will adopt? And two, do you feel like you have the tooling in place in order to execute if it is the latter of being more of a distributed or a mixed working environment once we're post this scenario? So
yeah, let's if you can pop your answers into the Q&A, it'd be really good to see this. It's really
Absolutely.
good to have that interaction with all of you on the call today, just so that we can really, this is the talk. We want to see the backgrounds that you come from. I mean, when I look at some of the companies or businesses that I have as a consumer tried to engage with since being confined to the house, I have been massively surprised, to Marvin's point, around the inability to actually speak to someone. Contact centres have been closed. The communication with customers has ceased on a verbal level and has actually become emails. And we've regressed many years in communication by a virus. I mean, I forget who I was saying this to the other day, but the ability to actually transform your business is now so accessible from the technologies that are available, from not only a UC perspective, but also from a contact center perspective, that actually there's no reason to to not be able to stand up a contact center of some shape or form overnight, dare I say. I wouldn't be thanked by our technical teams for saying that, but essentially it's ready to go.
The other angle to that as well, Ben, is a way that you can transform really quickly and really easily. One of the things that we're seeing is really, really popular right now is integrations. So you're migrating some of your services to the cloud. Well, no one cloud service does everything, and so you've got multiple cloud services. How can you integrate them together and look out for the out of the box integrations, because it's those that allow you to start working from anywhere. Again, I could do it from the car, but from any application as well. There's nothing to say that you need to be in the Ring Central application to make a call, to receive a message, that kind of thing. So that's how you can start to stitch together the solutions that you do have into a workflow. And a workflow you create to match your environment, the kind of work you're doing. So those integrations, they're really key. Look out for those, because they help you to join the dots, essentially.
Absolutely. I think that really underlines the importance of a holistic strategy, technology strategy for organizations, rather than sort of jumping into things on a piecemeal basis. I think, we've all been probably responsible for what we call shadow IT, but it's something to keep very much front and center in one's mind to ensure that you are continually following your business's strategy and looking at the requirements and the objectives of that organization, rather than jumping into different products and services that don't necessarily match up. But I completely agree that, again, out of the box integrations between different products and services is there's a nuance to understanding what you can achieve with those out of the box integrations. And unless you're careful, you can find yourself in a position where you're wishing that you were having very expensive customizations written. And that's where really that, again, this holistic approach and understanding the technologies that you're adopting comes into its own.
Absolutely. So from a consultancy side of it, the way I look at it is we look at the technologies, we look at the way that we can stitch them together, like Marvin has said, and we look at what would have to be custom and what is really out the box. And more importantly, we make sure that that's aligned to business processes and business outcomes, right? So as long as all of those things are looked at very holistically and, almost sometimes over a complex whiteboard, you get to unpick and make sure that you're choosing the right partners, you're choosing the right solutions in order to basically be able to transform the way that people work with the least barrier to entry, because people will resist change, and that's usually the barrier that you have to fight initially.
I think you raised a really good point there, Amit, in terms of out of the box integrations are great, but what if the out of the box integration doesn't do what you want it to do? And that's where your holistic approach to IT comes into play. If you can use something like APIs to embed communications into your strategy as well, because your strategy might be not to use a Ring Central desktop, to use another desktop. How do you essentially make the platform do what you want it to do? It has to be flexible. So we make integration easy with out of the box, but then with API, we've got supreme flexibility as well. So that's the other thing to look out for. Can you, is the solution that you're subscribing to, is it open?
So interestingly, just looping back to Amit's earlier question, across the board, the answers are coming in that much more flexible working is going to remain for the long term. And we've got comments like unlikely to ever fully reoccupy in a pre-COVID style. and we've got a couple saying looking to reduce office space by 50%, which is exactly as I was alluding to earlier on, that a potential client I was talking to the other day was looking to do as well. And general sentiment is that actually a lot of people are working reasonably well at the moment, but do need to have a bit of a holistic review at the end of all of this to facilitate longer term working at home.
I think if we it would be interesting, sort of, jump in the DeLorean and go forwards 12 months to see the differences in the types of verticals. For example, as an office worker, it's quite easy for us to go from one box that we work in to another box that we work in. But if you're a retailer, and your job is servicing people coming in to buy things, it's quite interesting to see and read some articles on how businesses that are probably non-obvious in the retail space are actually starting to look more to their digital strategy around technologically social distancing, where actually they're much more reliant on actually using a technology to call or message someone, rather than going all the way across a store to the other side. And obviously we have some good case studies on our side around the retail space. It'd be very interesting to see how that changes, because it sounds like understandably a lot of people are liking the environment at which they're working in, albeit for children and dogs and Amazon deliveries and all sorts of things that occasionally enrich our calls. But for the most part, it's good for mental health.
I think it's incredible. Like, we thought technology was part of our lives before. Now, technology is, fundamental to everything that we do. Really, everybody that we talk to, everything that we buy right now, everything is based on technology. I think it's an incredible. Just back to your point there, Ben, on digital channels. So I worked with a retail organisation. They had lots of retail stores, household brand, you would know them. And their customers were coming into the retail stores to pick up items, but they wanted to actually converse with the store via text. And the business couldn't put in place that technology fast enough. So the branches started to use WhatsApp. And then the business got wind of it, and they're like, okay, so you're taking essentially business data outside of the business now in a way that we can't control. And that's where the flexibility and the openness of the platform comes into play. Whatever you do today, you need to know that it can do whatever you want it to do tomorrow as well, to continually evolve and change. Who imagines something like this could happen? But wouldn't it be great if you had something that was flexible enough to allow you to really work? I'm sat in a car. What more do you want?
But also, COVID aside, if you think about it from the perspective of, it doesn't have to be a virus that sends people home from an office. It could be a fire or a flood or structural instability. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be obviously what currently is going on. But how does a business adapt to that, and what then comes into play? Because if you have a contact center, a call center of 200 people, and the heating stops working, how does your business keep going? Because I don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure at a certain temperature, people can't. It's not seen to be a temperature fit for working. Or maybe I made that up. Maybe that's just convenient, but in my house, it's not an issue.
I think really that comes down to businesses really looking at their own BCDR policies and procedures. So it's all great talking about all the new toys and the digital transformation, etc. I think a core component of pretty much all organizations is to also look at things for disaster and for business continuity, making sure that they have good plans in place, making sure that they test those regularly, in order for scenarios like you just said, there's a fire in the building, everybody needs to go. it's at that point where they're looking at their DR and BCP plans and going, okay, has the tools and solutions that we chose given us that easy use to move away from that fixed office? And if not, what is the plan in order to execute so that we can get all of our users up and running as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
And I think crucially to that is choosing the products and services where disaster recovery and business continuity are inherently built into the platform. So that in a way, rather than having to design your business continuity plan, it's almost answered for you because of the products and services that you've chosen. I think, you know, Conosco, we have a few people who work from home occasionally. We have one or two who work at home almost full time, but broadly speaking, most people come to the office. And so we hadn't particularly designed our infrastructures around the ability for everyone to work at home, but the move to it was seamless because of the products and services that we have always picked, and by always choosing products that where disaster recovery and business continuity are front and center of the solution, and you know, Ring Central obviously being fundamental to that in our organisation.
Absolutely.
And I think we've touched on this a lot already. And again, I'm gonna put the attendees to the test in a second to give us your views on this. But you know, for the most part, I'd say the majority of us were sent home with no pass, and that has changed. We probably adapted fairly quickly. I know lots of people got nice, fresh new laptops and webcams and all sorts of peripherals that they needed for working at home. I even had one myself when my laptop died. I was given a new one within the same day. So yeah, things have very much changed. But I'd like to know from those that have joined us, and from, you know, Amit, Max, and Marvin, what was one of the first challenges that you faced when you realised that there was no escape in the house? Did you have all the tech that you needed? What was the biggest thing you thought, I really need that, but I don't have it, and how can I get it? It'd be good to see what that was. For me, it was cables for my monitor. Bit of a first world problem. I can still work. I still have my laptop. I have everything that essentially that I need. But that's because I've basically been a home worker for 15 years.
Yeah, but even that's changed though, Ben. Like I've worked from home for a long time now, and there's definitely been a relaxation. You know, I'm sat in a car. What do you wear? You know, I'm wearing a t-shirt. You know, it's okay for a child to whiz past in the background now, which, you know, that would have been frowned upon. So I think even what we've been doing for a long time has changed. What is acceptable and what isn't has changed. But for me, the biggest thing is it's culture. It's really, really important. I find you know, managing your work-life balance is really important when you work from home. There is a temptation to start earlier and finish later because you don't have to drive anywhere. And we as you get the capability to work from anywhere, it gets harder to stop. So it's really you know, it's about the culture of the organization. Some of the things that we do is, you know, we really promote wellness events. We have online quizzes. We've had one of our sales leaders giving cookery lessons on video at lunchtime, and everyone kind of cooks along, and virtual mixology sessions. You know, you need to you know, that culture is really important. Burnout can happen when working from home, so you need to make sure you put a culture in place that allows people to talk and speak up, and essentially, you know, take a break when they need it as well. That's what I do. I work at a different pace now, I might work longer, but I work at a different pace. And, you know, if I want to go to the nativity play at Christmas, I go and do it. You know, that work-life balance is key.
I think if you look at the other end of the spectrum, I was watching the other day, I don't know if you've come across it, the BBC programme called Click, which is a sort of technology roundup. There was a very worrying section on it last week, I think it was, where they were talking about software that or services that monitor staff's movements and what they're up to. You know, down to keystrokes, what they're doing with their mouse, what windows they've got open on their computer. You know, even talking about visual recognition of what your eyes are doing. Are you looking down at a second laptop? And that sort of stuff I thought was absolutely terrifying. That, you know, if the businesses that are slightly more old school in their approach to allowing remote working was to start to adopt some of those sorts of practices longer term, I thought that would be pretty terrifying. Marvin, I think your points around sort of well-being and people having a different pace of life, and you know, you might be working exactly the same number of hours, but you might do an hour at 6 a.m. and then take a couple of hours off in the middle of the day. Or I think that's really key to the new world, because it's all about giving people more flexibility and a better work-life balance.
Absolutely.
Sorry, you go, Amit.
No, sorry, I'll let you finish.
No, I was just talking to a client of ours the other day who was saying that they've been really, really enjoying a 3-hour bike ride in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And that's cool. You know, you don't, who's to say, back on this software that I was talking about, the monitoring services, who's to say that somebody sitting at their desk from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. is being productive, even if they are looking directly at the screen and don't have Netflix open in the browser? You know, I think it's all about measuring productivity rather than measuring people's time at their computer.
Absolutely, I think that's one of the, you know, the biggest eye openers for some of our customers that were probably a bit more resistant to working from home, is understanding the metrics that they need to measure the output rather than the time being logged per se, or, you know, that specific 9 till 6 block. You know, I've started cycling in the evenings and just taking half an hour just to get some air, get some exercise, and, you know, refreshing myself. So, you know, I do feel the benefits of it. I think for some of the customer base that we have, one of the biggest challenges has been that they weren't ready, right? So we've seen things like spikes in laptop requests, you know, and so hardware sometimes, like Ben alluded to, his biggest challenge was cables. Yeah, I think initially it was trying to get everybody ready. And finally, touch upon the cultural side of it, I completely wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that this distributed workforce has come through. Working in a single office, it's easier to, I wouldn't say manage, but influence a culture. And you have to be very creative in this distributed workforce. So I think even us as an organization, we haven't got to the mixology or the cooking stage at the moment. But we have started doing things like virtual game nights. So, you know, I've seen people in my team playing, you know, game, you know, whatever games they play on PlayStation or Xbox, or, you know, offline, and, you know, having some form of downtime with their colleagues, which they might have done historically by going to grab a bite to eat or going for a drink after work, to making sure that you continue to promote the culture that is so important within organizations.
So we have a global world relay tomorrow where people from all over the world in our company will run for half an hour, and we'll see how far we can cover in 24 hours. It's things like that. I love stuff like this. I truly believe that some good things can come out of this situation. We just need to grab hold of them when we can and like keep hold of them. One of the other things I wanted to say though was, flexible working is important. I'm just speaking for myself here, but I do believe that this is reflective of, the wider employment market. I couldn't accept a job where I had to go into an office 5 days a week. It would not work for me. For me, and for many people, flexible working is a must for them as well. And that's the other side of it. I think as the generations come through, that perception will also continue to change as well.
I think you're absolutely right. But I think that there's a huge number of people out there that didn't know that was a requirement.
Yeah.
I'd probably put myself in that category as well. I've always kind of felt this compulsion to get to the office and have my set time in the office, and I've enjoyed it as much as anybody. Having more flexibility and just I've been working completely different hours, and if I need to go off and do something with the kids in the afternoon, that's cool. I don't feel guilty that for doing that.
And that's entirely it, Max. It's the power of possibility. It's knowing that you can be just as productive working so close to the outside world, where you can just walk out your front door and into the park or down to the river, wherever. And I was reading an article the other day about productivity overload. I think it was actually called productivity burnout, saying that there are people saying that they are now so close to the ability to always work that actually they're now struggling to put those physical barriers in to actually allow themselves time to just settle, just to have that minute.
I would agree with that. My mobile has had more use than it's ever had before. Definitely, and I do find myself sort of checking on things, and so that's where personal discipline has to come into it.
Absolutely.
So just looping back to the question that you raised a little earlier on. So there's one answer that we saw as well, which was actually not around the technologies that you've chosen, but the hardware people are using, and that only 50% of an organization's staff had desktops in the office, and suddenly there's a big shift to laptops. I mean, if there were one thing that we would say we saw in March, April, and that would be the lack of hardware availability from the likes of Dell and co. We definitely saw, you'd get a quote from Dell and they'd say, you'll need to order this in the next 15 minutes, and then the logistics of going to the client and getting sign off, and then it would be gone. That stock. So yes, I think we would certainly echo that logistics was more of an issue than technology for us, certainly.
And I wonder, sorry, Marvin, I wonder how technology will change for those of you that weren't getting my excited kind of pitch before the webinar started. I was talking about a new purchase that I'd made, and Max and Amit are obviously smiling because they knew that I was going to talk about this. But I'm wondering if the future for us, from a working perspective, will be more that we use things like iPads to actually, and tablet technology to actually work from. Because something resonated with me. One of my colleagues once said to me that they wanted to, they set themselves a little experiment, and that was to just use technology from the browser and not from the desktop. Now, one of the panelists that should be resonating with right now, and it's just about that conceptual change of the way you work. Now, I personally am trying to almost force a change onto myself to be a little bit lighter on my feet physically when I'm going to and fro from meetings and seeing my partners, and actually trying to use a tablet a lot more, and trying to maybe leave the laptop at home, because it comes with a massive charger, in fact a gratuitously large charger. I don't even know why it's that big, but also the case of the laptop is made out of metal. So it's quite a cumbersome piece of technology. Now I'm trying to implement myself a new way of working, and we'll see how that pans out. So far it's going pretty good, but I think there's going to be a lot of changes in the technologies that we use, and maybe some of those have been driven by the last, eight odd weeks. And yes, it was Marvin that went browser based.
well we're pretty much browser based as well, actually, almost exclusively.
Yeah, that's how I work. I don't have any applications installed at all. I just have a tab for everything in a Chrome browser.
Yeah.
And WebRTC allows you to embed all of the communications into all of those applications in the browser. So I literally don't need to leave that screen. It's a great segue into the next slide, Ben. It's the future of the modern workplace, how things are going to change. I think that so some people, they'll say we're all going to go running back to the office. Some people will say we're going to stay at home. It's changed forever. I prefer to think it's probably somewhere in the middle. There are probably some roles that are better served in an office location. There will be some industries and some roles where that is still a requirement. And before Max, you were talking about an organisation that were talking about doubling their office size. I look at that as, well, why don't you keep your office size and just fill it with more people, but have most of them remote working. Everything's a hot desk. People are transient. They come in and out the office on the way to meetings. I still like going into offices. You get a level of engagement with your team that you don't get in the exact same way over a video meeting, let's say. But I think technology will become increasingly important, and we'll see different uses of technology to augment the technology that we've already got. So video, let's look at video. Language translation is something that's starting to come through now. Transcribing of meetings is something that's starting to come through. Well, what about if you could apply some AI to those transcriptions and maybe take the actions that were verbally assigned in the meeting and transcribe them and send them into a team message? I see use cases where technology will augment and improve other technology. That's what I see next.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Marv. I think more things will move to the browser, and I think you're probably already there. I think we talked about APIs previously. If for me, director of tech, when I'm looking at any solution, if it hasn't got a really rich API, I question, its roadmap, its development roadmap, in order to make sure that how am I going to glue this to something else that we use or need to embed into workflow. So those are the kinds of things that are super important when you're looking at solutions and looking at implementing a whole digital transformation project per se. Going forward in agile working, without, like I said previously, without some of those underpinning technologies and solutions in place, it becomes really difficult in order to measure the output, as well as give that capability to the end user for any given organizations. And I wholeheartedly believe that we're not going to go back where everybody's going to go back, or we're not going to go to a situation where everybody's going to stay distributed. There is going to be a middle ground, and there are going to be certain roles you just cannot be fulfilled in a remote capacity. And so those would likely to be the first ones that will go back. But I think everybody's going to use tech as much as they can in order to say, we used to do this process in this way, in a very interactive face-to-face measure. We can do this better by augmenting technology here and having a better user experience, because really the uplift should be that the customer experience is elevated by augmenting the tech on top of it.
I think another issue that actually has been raised in one of the questions is that, and it loops back to the previous slide, but is very relevant here too, the consideration of Wi-Fi and home internet connectivity in the modern workplace and remote working and agile working, etc., is a very crucial point. Ubiquitous connectivity is key, and that's going to need to really be front and center of people's digital strategy going forward.
Yes.
You know, whether it's data-only connections in laptops, and you know, Ben, you mentioned your iPad earlier on. Presumably, it's got a SIM slot in it, and which is going to allow for remote working more. But I think, you know, again, standardizing on consumer kit for businesses, organizations, and build that into IT budgets is important, so that, you know, the likes of your IT department or outsourced IT department is able to quickly troubleshoot people's home connectivity issues if you've standardized on the kit, and that is part of your technology strategy.
Absolutely, and I think also using newer technologies will be super important, right? Well, we see the emergence of 5G. You know, there are already solutions out there where you can create a Wi-Fi hotspot off a 5G, you know, dongled solution that we, you know, obviously can provide, and so that gives people who are in probably really difficult situations or locations where they don't have fiber going in, they're still using very old copper-based technologies. To be able to use the latest technology, something like 5G, in order to basically bypass some of the steps in of the connectivity and use the, you know, the latest solutions.
So this is why I'm sat in the car.
You get 5G in the car.
So I've been working flexibly for years now, really. So it was quite normal to me. What wasn't normal was my children have never flexibly schooled. And so they are now using video. They literally started on Monday. All of their lessons prior were just online in a Google Classroom. They're now doing it over video. And so, you know, I've got multiple video streams going pretty much all day. So I had to invoke my disaster recovery plan, which is essentially, you know, tethering my laptop to my mobile device. And we were joking before we came on this session, I actually get a better signal in my car. You know, I am the epitome of remote working. I hosted a webinar, so I was presenting the slides. I was doing all of the talking with a live demonstration a couple of weeks ago, and again, I did it in the car. I turned my camera on at the end, and you know, the question I asked, which is, you know, relevant, is, you know, can you do this? Can you work from wherever you need to? If you can work from anywhere, you don't need a DR plan. You know, it really simplified. You just need to be able to work.
And also, if you consider the cost of tooling out staff with the correct hardware, services, and connectivity in comparison to sitting in an office, it loops back to what I was saying sort of much earlier in the conversation. You know, the cost is insignificant in comparison to the cost of somebody sitting at a desk in an office.
So we did a study at a prior organisation where I worked, and we looked at exactly that. We implemented various, some would say quite wacky policies. One was around printing, so all of the filing cabinets in the office, they had slanted lids, so you couldn't put piles of paper on them. People were actively discouraged printing because they figured out that the printers that were used in the office, an individual printer in a year cost about £30,000. With you know, buying the printer, all of the consumables that go into it, the maintenance contract to support it, all of that kind of stuff. It's a win-win-win-win-win working from home, I think. You know, I'm more productive, I believe, because I have access to the right tools. And to your point, you don't need to give me, you know, a chair in the canteen, a desk with a monitor, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So listen, we could talk for hours about this stuff, but I think we're soon 11 a.m., so I think we should probably wrap up. Does anyone have any questions for any of us before we sign off? I think it's worth saying, if anyone's typing, that we'd love this to be the beginning of any future conversations with anyone on this webinar. I hope you found it very useful. And if you'd like to talk more about holistic IT strategies or unified communications or any part of it, mobile working, home working, etc., we'd love to talk to you in more detail about it. So please do get in touch. I don't see any questions coming in, so perhaps we've covered everything.
Just give it a minute or two.
We'll give it another minute or so. But thank you, Ben and Marvin and Amit. It's been a really good chat.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We'll just have a couple. Okay, don't think anything's coming through, so just going to say thanks to Max and Amit. Thanks, Marvin. Go and stretch your legs.
Thanks all.
Thanks for joining. Have a good day.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.